Forget the steak dinners and saloon feasts. A real cowboy's diet was brutal, boring, and basically the same three things every single day. On a cattle drive, you ate beans, bread, and coffee, and you were grateful for it. This is what they actually lived on out there. The center of a cowboy's whole food world was the chuckwagon. It was a kitchen on wheels, a converted wagon packed with food, pots, and supplies, with a fold down work table on the back. A rancher named Charles Goodnight invented it, and it changed the whole cattle drive forever. And the man who ran it, the cook called Cookie, was the most important person on the drive after the trail boss. He was often the oldest, the grumpiest, and the highest paid. Cross him, and your life on the trail got very unpleasant very fast. The number one food was beans, pinto beans, cooked slow in a pot all day, sometimes for hours. Cowboys ate so many they nicknamed them the prairie strawberries. Cheap, filling, and they kept forever. If you were a cowboy, you ate beans until you dreamed about them. Right next to the beans came bread, but not the soft stuff you know today. Cowboys ate hard biscuits and sourdough, baked in a heavy cast iron Dutch oven buried in coals. A good batch of hot biscuits could lift the whole camp's mood after a brutal day. And then there was coffee, gallons of it. Cowboys ran on coffee, boiled thick, black, and strong enough to wake the dead. They drank it morning, noon, and night. The most famous brand, Arbuckles, was so common out west. Arbuckles basically just meant coffee. Now here's the irony that gets everyone. A cowboy was surrounded by thousands of cattle and almost never ate beef. Those cattle were the product. They were money on legs. Eating one was like burning cash. So the beef walked to the market while the cowboys ate beans. The exception was when a calf was hurt or had to be put down. Then the cook made one dish cowboys actually got excited about, and they gave it a name you couldn't say in church. Son of a bitch stew, made from the flesh organs of a calf, heart, liver, brains, and marrow gut. For meat that could actually survive the trail, they relied on salt pork and bacon, heavily salted and packed in barrels. It lasted for months without spoiling. Greasy, salty, and tough, but it was protein. And on a cattle drive, you took what you could get. Then there was hardtack, a cracker so hard cowboys joked you could break a tooth on it. You had to soak it in coffee or stew just to chew it, and it often came with a free bonus, weevils. You learned not to look too closely at your food back then. Fresh fruit and vegetables were almost non existent on the trail. Cowboys mostly went without, which means scurvy and other deficiency diseases were the real danger on long drives. When they could, they grabbed wild onions or greens, but mostly it was beans and meat and bread on repeat. The secret weapon behind all of it was the Dutch oven, a thick cast iron pot with a heavy lid. Buried in coals with more coals piled on top, it could bake, roast, and stew. With that one pot, a good cook could turn flour and beans into something almost like home. Good cooks guarded one thing above all else: the sourdough starter. It was a living blob of fermented dough used to make bread rise, and it had to be kept alive and warm, with some cooks literally sleeping with their starter on cold nights so it wouldn't die. Mealtime had one rule: eat fast. The herd did not stop for lunch. Breakfast before sunrise, dinner after dark. You wolved it down between shifts. There was no relaxing meals on a cattle drive, just fuel, shoveled in as quick as you could manage. Water was a problem too. On the trail, it was often muddy and scarce, or full of things that make you sick. That's a big reason coffee was king. Boiling the water made it safer to drink. A cowboy trusted his coffee a lot more than he trusted a strange creek. Sweets were rare and treasured. A little molasses, dried fruit, or sugar was a luxury. When a cook had no fresh fruit, he'd improvise, even baking a vinegar pie, using vinegar to fake the tang of fruit. Desperate but on the trail, it tasted like heaven. A good cook could make or break a drive. If the food was decent and on time, morale held. If the cook was lousy or the beans ran out, tempers flared fast. In a camp of armed, exhausted, hungry men was not something a trail boss wanted to deal with. So the cowboys dreamed about the end of a trail, town. After months of beans and salt pork, they'd ride in starving for real food, fresh steak, eggs, pie, and of course, whiskey. A cowboy's first meal in town was a feast he'd been fantasizing about for weeks. It's strange to think about some of the toughest men in American history riding through one of the harshest landscapes on earth, fueled almost entirely by beans, bread, and coffee. No fancy diet, no variety, just enough to keep a man in the saddle for one more brutal day. So that was cowboy food, repetitive, rough, and built for survival, not pleasure. They did the hardest job in America on the simplest meals imaginable. And honestly, the next time you complain about leftovers, just remember, at least it isn't son of a bitch stew for the fourth night in a row.